Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Ariel Tzadok here from the KosherTorah School, found online at, where else, www.koshertorah.com. I am bringing you tonight's, for me is tonight, for you listening to any recording, audio or video, it's going to be whenever it's going to be. But anyway, this is lesson 8 in our series of the biblical origins of the prophetic Kabbalah. And we started out the series subtitling it the Saga of Eliyahu HaNavi, Elijah the prophet. Well, in our last class, Elijah exited stage left. And now we have Elisha, his number one. I laugh here because Eliyahu, as we know, if anybody was a super Navi, it was Eliyahu HaNavi. We still echo his presence to this very day. And yet, what we're about to learn now of his top man, Elisha, proves that what Elisha requested from Eliyahu, which was, I want to be twice what you are. That's what he asked for. You gotta admit, let's use a very vernacular, modern term. It's very ballsy of him to have asked. All right, it's not like you're going up to a millionaire and say, hey, could you teach me how to make money because I want to make money twice as much as you. That's feasible. That's actually practical. If you go up to someone who is, I don't know, has a college degree, a PhD, and you say, I want to be twice as educated as you, again, that can be done. If someone has a PhD, you can have 2, you can have 3, 4. But when we're talking about, I don't like using the religious words because we have so many fantasies about what they mean as opposed to actually what they do mean. When we say something like Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, you know, people have elevated this to mythology, and they think anything religious is thereby divinely inspired. Well, let me tell you something, what divinely inspired means. It is anything that can be creative, innovative, and originative. And it's not just limited to religious literature. Have you ever listened to the masters of classical music? You don't think that's divinely inspired? My goodness. When you look at some of the profound wisdom from the nations of the world, you don't think that's divinely inspired? How about art or science? You don't think the likes of an Albert Einstein or a Nikola Tesla are inspired? Well, not maybe divine. I mean, God didn't talk to them. Oh, really? And you were in on the conversation to know that God didn't speak? Well, they weren't religious or they weren't holy and they didn't pray. And what, that limits God's hand? Well, yeah, because God will only talk to people, you know, religious like me, right? Wrong. You know something? That's a lesson that we learn very clearly from the Bible. Even somebody as, I don't know, whatever, as Bilam. Remember good old Balaam? All right? God spoke to him. And if God could speak to the Balaam, he can speak to anybody he wants. So you and I do not have license to go and wag our finger and say, God does this and God does that, and this is what God will do and this is what God won't do, blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry. I'm not God's policeman. Okay, I can't tell God what to do. I'm sorry. I'm not in the divine, boardroom every day when they're having, their business meetings of how to operate the universe. I don't get invited into those meetings. I guess I'm not at, that level that I help operate the universe. So, I mean, some of these other guys out there, Jewish or otherwise, might think that they are. Well, yes, because I read and I understand. Well, this is the perfect point. Tonight, we're going to read in what we call 2 Kings in 4th chapter. And we're going to read some of this really weird stuff about Elisha. But for those of you who will read, more so in usually translations and the like, the majority way that this chapter is addressed in Jewish circles is the way it normally is, or I should say as most of Tanakh is. This is at a level which we call in Hebrew pshat. The simple, straightforward, what is the text saying? In these stories from the books of Kings, most of the rabbis want to embellish the stories, add details to the stories, so as to give the stories a greater depth of personality. This is the level which we call pshat. So, for example, we're going to open up the story about a woman who was the wife of one of the disciples of the prophets and how her husband died, etc. The Tanakh, the Bible, does not identify this woman, but our sages ascribe to her an identity. We know her, we know who she is, we know her husband, we know the identity of the child, we know all of this stuff. Is it history? Is it midrash? It doesn't matter. If those details were essential to our understanding of the story would add them. But the story does have details in it that are not usually addressed at that simplistic level. This is that level of the teachings of the prophets, the Kabbalah of the prophets. And we call this in Hebrew sod, or secret, deeper levels. And that is, of course, the path that we take here at our KosherTorah school when I teach the Tanakh, the Bible. Now, you can go online to our course page, and you'll see I have a whole bunch of courses out there, biblical courses, books, from Samuel and Isaiah and the like, and we all have a whole bunch of other stuff I have to update and get stuff up. And we'll do more and more. I got courses coming up in Kohelet, Ecclesiastes. Something I've been longing to do for the longest time is coming, the Woman of Valor from the book of Proverbs. And all of these things, we'll read them like it says, and then we're going to get into the underlying details of what the authors of the text are really saying. Because that's where you get, if you will, allowing me to use the term, the meat and the potatoes of what the text is all about. And I say meat and potatoes as a synonym, with all due respect to all the vegans out there. The Rabbanit, I'm going to reveal her secret. She's a very strict vegan, and she yells at me all the time, anytime that I will eat poultry or anything of the kind. But look, she's 100 times more healthy than I am, so I have nothing to say. Anyway, we won't digress to discuss dietary habits at this time. We all have our Yetzer Hara, as we say. And as anybody who knows me knows, the first question, if I ever merit in the afterlife to go to the Garden of Eden, to heaven, the first question I'm going to ask, of course, is what? Religious stuff? Heck no, I'm just going to ask, where's the pizza? I hear they got the best heavenly pizza in heaven, so that's what I'm looking for. No, I'm not kidding. Why should I be? Anyway, getting back to serious stuff. When it comes to understanding the Bible, again, one of my greatest critiques, my frustration, is when I address things in public, not so much with my Jewish audiences in synagogues or yeshivas, but when I address the many of you who know me from, of course, the television program Ancient Aliens, and we're in places like Alien Con, and I'm interacting with many people through Facebook and YouTube and the like, who know me from the public domain, whose only knowledge of the Bible is from English translations, and then usually from poor translations at that. And they'll ask you, how does the Bible say that? And I have to take a step back and say, okay, first let's go back and see what the Bible really says. You have to unlearn what you have learned, as wise master Yoda taught Luke Skywalker. And yeah, that's so true when it comes to understanding the Bible. Remember, these are a collection of books that were written a long, long time ago in a place very, very far away. And of course, I'm making an allusion to the Star Wars language. Why? simply because I want you to recognize that even though Star Wars, of course, is fantasy, and our Bible we accept and embrace as reality, it is still as distant from us, and therefore its origins might be in our eyes or mind to be almost pharisaical. So many modernists will come and read these, in quote, miraculous stories of Eliyahu and Elisha, and they'll, dismiss them and say, these are just legends and stories that were written to embellish. Yeah, probably there was some, backwater, bumpkin out there who was like some right-wing extremist religionist, and of course they embellished him with all kinds of miraculous stories. Well, in all due respect, those things do happen, but not here. You have to understand. Now, I'm not going to argue for or against the historicity of these stories. In our religious faith, we accept it, and there's nothing more to argue. If you are of a secular point of view and you say, well, I don't accept that these are historical. Okay. What do you want from me? You believe whatever you want, right? It's not for me to argue with you your faith. My job as a scholar is to help you understand what the text is actually saying. Whether or not you want to accept it or not, that's your choice. I in all due respect, I have no agenda here. I really don't care. Remember what I said earlier? I have to keep reminding people. I'm not God's policeman. I don't worry about God's going to punish you. I'm not worried about you're going to get it in the afterlife. All of these kinds of concepts and ideas are foreign. Foreign to the way I think, foreign to the way I feel, and I hope and pray, foreign to the way I teach. Because here at our KosherTorah school, I have one job, one mission. And yes, I decided to accept it. Yes, I knew the job was dangerous when I took it. Shades of Mission Impossible and Super Chicken. What I'm here to tell you is this. I want to shine this light. I want to make this material publicly available for you. I want you to know that this is there. And I want to give it to you, if you will, even on a silver platter, as they say. Let me foreshadow to you something. Right now, towards the end of July 2020, I have just finished my 96 lessons of the Sefer Yetzirah course, which I've expanded way beyond what I offered in video. And I will be making it publicly available with all the additions shortly. So watch for it. But now I'm preparing my next class. And my next class, I've decided to take on a big challenge. There has been myth and mystery surrounding holy names and angels for so long. So I've decided, what the heck? Let's dispel with the myth and get down. Let's get real. And I'm going into the ancient, famous book of the angel Raziel HaMalach itself. And I'm going to teach you how the 72 triad name of God is actually used. Can we do that? Well, I'm going to show you. What you choose to do is up to you. But I'm going to document from a proper scholarly point of view because I want you to know. And I've always quoted this. You remember good old Moses? He said to Pharaoh, let my people go. Well, my personal motto is, let my people know. Because experience is power. And that, of course, is the motto of our KosherTorah school. But with that being said, let's move on and jump right into our text. We're going to deal here with a psychic Superman. Now, here's something very important to understand. What we call psychic ability, these are not gifts. Telepathy, clairvoyance, remote viewing, astral projection, all of this, whether you like it or not, is normal human stuff. That if our minds weren't constipated with CRAP, we would naturally express ourselves in these ways, just like many native, shamanistic, aborigine type people do on a normal basis, because it is normal for us. We all have these abilities, and we can unlearn what we have learned, and discover them, experience them, and the like. But with that being said, there are still powers and abilities far beyond that of mortal men. And that is what we're dealing with here with the likes of Elisha. Elisha expressed a powers, an ability to do things, which not the kind of normal stuff we all do, okay? Even, I mean, there were real people with power out there. And I'm not talking fortune telling. We don't do fortune telling. That's degrading. To try to tell you what the future holds, if anybody and everybody could do that, then everybody would be winning the multi-million-dollar lottery every week. But you don't see that happening. No. We do not necessarily seek to manipulate as much as to interact and dance with the universe. So we're going to read the stories of how people like Elisha danced and interacted with the universe. And I'm going to define and describe to you how it's done. And right now from the beginning, and I've discussed this in many of our previous classes, don't think that we're talking ancient history. Because we have great and holy sages who, to this day, do this kind of stuff. So that knowledge has never been lost. But it's not magic. It's not hocus pocus. It's not done through demons or angels. It's not even done as a direct action of God. It's done by the individual who is holy and righteous and pure, male or female, men and women. There's no difference in that respect. Calibrating the energy, you become the vessel. Now, with that being said, let's jump into our stories. Let's learn the parameters of the super psychic. Because remember this, a message which is very, very clear throughout all of the Bible. That which we call miracles don't happen like that. Okay? We, at least in my generation, we grew up knowing magic. Not Harry Potter nonsense. We grew up with old, what, at least in my day, were the innocent type television programs like Bewitched or I Dream of Jeannie, where at the wiggle of a nose or blink of an eye, magic appeared. All right, that's the way we always think of magic. We are conditioned, brainwashed. And that, of course, is television. When Moses parted the Red Sea, go see the Cecil B. DeMille version of it. Probably is on YouTube somewhere. Oh, I love it. It's great. But it's almost comedic because it's not what happened. It's certainly not what the Bible says. You see, all of that which we call miraculous happens within the context of natural law. But the nature of that natural law seems to be subject to a higher natural law. Maybe something we should call supernatural. But I'm going to throw in that word, law. Because everything has to happen in accordance to its proper way. There is no magic, no wiggling the nose, blinking the eyes, and things appear. It's never like that. So for those people say, oh, it's a miracle, and it just happens. No, miracles don't just happen. Things happen in accordance to a pattern. And our Bible makes that very, very clear here. So on that note, let's read the story of what happens. Okay, chapter 4. So again, I'm not going to get into the pshat of the identities and all that stuff. It's lovely, lovely stuff, but it's not our direction tonight. A woman of the wives of the disciples, the sons, children of the prophets, cries out to Elisha, your servant, my husband, died. And know that your servant did fear God, and a creditor has come to take our 2 children for himself as slaves. Let's explain. Somehow, somewhere, this child of the prophet passed away by whatever means. And in biblical times, the way and the nature of debt was that if you owed a financial amount, what you could do was what's called today indentured servitude. Either you yourself or your young children can be given employment Now, the Hebrew word for employment is actually the same word as slavery. So people misinterpret this. When it says that her children are going to be sold as slaves, that doesn't mean they're going to be whipped and beaten for the rest of their lives. No. They would have been taken in by the creditor, who, in all due respect, probably would have taught them a trade for a maximum of 6 years. Go into the book of Exodus and read the laws. But a debt is a debt. All right, I'm not going to get into discuss the morals and the values of ancient biblical economics. I'm just helping you understand the situation. And the woman, of course, doesn't want to lose her kids. I mean, gosh. So what's she going to do? There's a debt to be paid. So Elisha says to her, what should he say? In the name of the Lord, I cancel your debt. Money is evil. So therefore, whether you give money or owe money, it's all evil. Does Eliyahu go to the debtor and say, shame on you for having this debt? I curse you in the name of the Lord, and the bears who eat the kids are going to come and eat you. Any of that? No. Elisha recognizes the value of economic responsibility. Hey, does any of that sound familiar today? And gives the woman an opportunity to meet her creditors. He doesn't cancel the debt, but gives her an opportunity to pay it. Listen, he says, okay, this is what I can do for you. All right, what do you have? What do you have in your house? And you got to ask, what does it matter what she has in the house? And the answer is actually, my even English translation quotes the Zohar. Very progressive that it does. Because the Zohar brings down one of these concepts. We are taught, and especially we dealt with this in our Sefer Yetzirah series, you have God who creates something from nothing. Only God can create something from nothing, whatever nothing is, and who knows what that is. But we have the ability to create something from something. You see, in our dual reality, Kabbalah speaks it's Asiya and Yetzirah. In the Bible, it's called the heavens and the earth. We have a two-tiered reality. See, little Sierra, say hello, Sierra. She loves to listen to class. We live in a two-tier reality. Human reality, doggy reality. Ha, ha, ha. No. Understand, and this is important. I love the movie The Matrix because of the example of the character Neo, who, if you remember at the end of the movie, he like looks around and he's in this computerized system. He sees behind the veil of the actual workings of his physical world. Well, our world is not that different. You see, as the Midrash teaches us, as we know from the Bible and elsewhere, behind our physical reality, there is what we call, in quote, a spiritual reality. Call it an energetic reality. Call it by whatever terms that we so wish to describe things, whatever. But that energetic interaction or laws is the reality which structures this physical world. And if we have the opportunity and the ability to get into the program, get into the matrix, kind of like the Neo character, then we can actually reprogram behind the physical in that other world and materialize its reality here, changing the shape and force of this physical world. Now, some people think happens like that. It's a miracle. But it has to happen in accordance to the laws. The Sefer Yetzirah teaches all about this. So, based upon this principle, Elisha knows he can't make something come out of nothing. But he can make something come out of something. He can rewrite the program and have an opening, and through that opening, channel. He's not the first to have done this. Oh, no. I'm not going to talk about Eliyahu. I'm going to take you back in a minute to Joshua, our good old Talmid Moshe Rabbeinu. You might know what I'm talking about already, but let's go on. So she says, I have nothing in the house other than this little jar of oil. So what does he say? We know this, a very famous story. You don't need me to read every detail of the story. I'm just going to tell you the details here. All right. He says to her, go to your neighbors, get everything that can hold something, every kind of jar, every kind of pot. Get the neighbor's bathtub, get the sink, get their backpack, get anything and anything that can hold something. All right? I want you to take all of these vessels, bring them into the house, close the door. You and your kids are only, Elisha himself isn't even there. You and the kids, that's it. Close the door. The Bible says that a number of times. You got to ask, what's a big deal? You shouldn't want anybody to see? Well, what's there to see? All right? You have like this little thing, a little ounce thing, and it's pouring out 50, 100, 200 gallons from a single ounce. Many of you might be very familiar with the famous stories of Rabbi Yisrael Abu Chatzera, better known as Baba Sali, who used to take a bottle of arak, the Moroccans' favorite liqueur, and he would pour like big glasses, 50 to 100 people, and the bottle would still be full. But the secret was he always used to put a towel around the bottle. You couldn't see what was going on inside. Why? It was closed. Apparently, the secret law is this. When there's going to be a shift from the one principle of what we call the normal world, shifting the matrix into what we call the supernatural, the abnormal, it happens only in a finite space. And that finite space has to be demarcated. With Baba Sali, the bottle had to be closed off with the towel. With the woman with the oil, the room had to be sealed. And earlier, much earlier, you have the famous story of the Battle of Joshua, where he calls upon the sky itself to stop. And the sun stood still in the sky for like 24 hours. Now, that's a pretty big feat. I don't know about you, but I think that's the biggest miracle of them all. It's certainly bigger and better than parting a sea. How do you get the entire universe to stop moving for a period of time? That's pretty slick. But when you read like many of the Kabbalistic commentaries and the like, they'll tell you that's not what happened. If the world couldn't stop, I mean, at the equator, we're rotating at 1,000 miles an hour. For all of a sudden we stop, we don't go blasting out into space at 1,000 miles an hour. Okay, can't do that. So, what happened? They say that the place of the battle was actually taken out of space-time and put in like its own bubble. And things happened in that bubble outside of the normal parameters of space and time. You're going to ask me to explain that? I'm not the physicist. I don't have the physical explanation, but that's what happened. And it's exactly what's happening here and now. This area was sealed. The woman took her little flask and poured and poured and poured and poured and poured in this enclosed environment. And this is that biblical prophetic lesson that we learn that the Zohar is making a reference to. When we are dealing with this type of energetic flow, it has to be within the concealed construct of the finite space, which is essentially becoming like a bubble reality outside of the norm. Baba Sali did that with a bottle of arak. And this is exactly the principle that's underlying the teaching right here. So this is why that was important. The Zohar learns from this. If you and me, this is our lesson, want to accomplish something in this world, which requires, shall we say, extraordinary abilities, powers far beyond that of mortal man, do it in secret, in an enclosed area. If you want to get something accomplished, don't go advertising it. Don't go say, let me show you what I'm going to do. We're not showmen. We're not entertainers. Okay? As the verse says in the Bible, right? The glory of God is to keep things concealed. I'm trying to speak in Hebrew and English at the same time. That's what happens. But this is the point. You keep things quiet. You keep things secret. No one needs to see. No one needs to know. So if the neighbors are outside the house saying, what is she doing with all those vessels? And let's just, for argument's sake, say Elisha's out there, says, oh, she's taking this little 1 ounce, she's turning it into 200 gallons. And the neighbors are going, yeah, right. I'll bet you that instead of bringing in empty vessels, she brought in full vessels. Or I'll bet you there's like a hose that's pouring things in from behind the house, or some similar rational reason. If that mindset was imposed on that area, that conflicting consciousness could short circuit the consciousness necessary to bring the flow. This is why we always conceal things. Thoughts are things, and what a person thinks has power, positive or negative. Don't go blaming it on the angels. Don't go blaming it on the demons. None of the above. It's you. And when you want to accomplish something, you have to have the focus, the power, and the direction to know with such overt intensity. You block out anything else, and then you drive the point home. In Kabbalah, in the prophetic teachings, we call this hitbodedut, mental isolation, complete focus with the absolute blocking out of everything else. Those of us do this in different ways. I can do this in the early morning hours. Rabbanit can do this in the late evening hours. Everybody who knows what to do knows how to do this, each in their own way. And that's the important thing here. Because notice Elisha didn't say to the woman, this is what I want you to do. He just says, what do you got? Blessing only resides on yesh meyesh, something that's already there. So you need to have something. If you want to make $1 million, you need to start with $1. You can't start with nothing. This is how we all build, from something to something greater. That's the message. So she fills up all the vessels, as we know, and then the oil stops. That was it. It was done. And then what does he say? He says to the woman, now, sell that oil. Pay your debt. Don't disregard it. Don't say I'm too spiritual. Don't say it's unfair. No. There's an obligation within an economic context. Pay your debt. And then you'll have the rest of the money that you can live on. We could put the end at the story right there. But the lessons that we learned from this are the practical, what we call the sod, the real lessons. It doesn't matter the identity of the woman, who, what, when, but we must recognize that we might not have the supernatural ability to do something like this, like an Elisha or like a Baba Sali. But in our own ways, we can do this. We might not be able to have that level of consciousness that we can go into the, in quote, matrix, into the astral projection of the Hechalot, and therefore manipulate things in the heavenly palaces. But that doesn't mean that we don't have any ability. And we call this positive thinking, creative consciousness, and the like. Don't underestimate these things. Is it going to give you everything that you want? Probably not. But it doesn't mean it won't give you a lot. And your greatest enemy in accomplishing this is the enemy that the Bible calls Amalek, the one who is the enemy of God. And Amalek, of course, is a secret code, the numerical value of the Hebrew word safek, which means doubt. Doubt is your greatest enemy. This woman had no doubts. She said, Elisha was going to do this, got done. Elisha didn't do it. She did it. Elisha wasn't even there. She did it. Because her emunah, faith, her consciousness was linked with his, and the flow in that underlying dimension which unites enabled it to materialize into the physical form. That is the lesson that we need to learn, especially in the crazy times going on today, where in which we're being torn apart right and left, figuratively and literally. We got to remember, go up, bring down the power that we become the conduit for. We're the little vessel. We're the little oil. And from us, gallons and gallons and gallons can come gushing. Do not underestimate the power that you as an individual have. Moving right along. So, it was in that day that Elisha went. He's traveling, and he says that he passes the house of what's called here an Isha Gedolah, a woman of importance, okay? And as he's on the way, she apparently knew who she was and begged him, please come to my house and have a meal. Stop on the way. And it says that whenever he would come, he would stop there and have a meal. And then she said to her husband, all right, hey, look, this is a holy man of God. He's coming by here. Maybe we could set him up, all right? We'll make a small apartment for him. We'll make an upper chamber to the house. We'll have a place there for him, a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp. And this is, embellished and taught in great Kabbalistic depth, but that's not my point of our story here. Elisha has, if you will, natural, normal human needs. Oh my gosh, he's a prophet. And he's got to eat. He's got to sleep. He needs a place to lie down. He has to have a table, a chair, and a lamp. How bourgeois of him, right? What kind of man is he? Why can't he just eat his bread with salt and sleep on the floor, Pirkei Avot stuff? But no, he's got to live this fancy life. Well, I'm not so sure it was fancy, but remember, it says she is an Isha Gedolah. She's an important woman. So I'll bet you the little place that they made for him was probably very comfortable. And it was to show honor and respect to a man of God, which is only fitting and proper. You see, we have this terrible misunderstanding, which I think is mostly Christian in origin, that if you are spiritual, you're supposed to despise and hate everything of this physical world. Nothing is further from the truth, especially from the biblical Torah, especially the Kabbalistic teachings. Everything in this world has its value, blessing, and good, or you flip it around and make it bad. I mean, this is a very important point. There's nothing wrong with being wealthy. There's nothing wrong with enjoying the finer things in life. If you're that kind of person and you like that, and you're in a position of economic stability where you can afford these things, well, God bless. Don't think that this in any ways contradicts anything spiritual. You see, we're thinking here that when Elisha goes into this place, he's like in this small little room, and they just made him like a straw mat, and he's got like this little candle, and they're like giving him morsels of bread. No, she's got a wealthy family here, and they're taking care of him. And to this very day, people, rabbis, even like myself, we have our patrons, the people who believe in the value of what we have to represent and offer, and they come forth and offer their support so that we can bring what we do to the world. And this isn't just true of rabbis. It was true of artists. Leonardo da Vinci had his patrons and the like. This is something that's very common in all civilizations and societies to this very day. All right, so this is normal. This woman was his patron. So, moving right along. He wants to give her a blessing. He says, you've been really good to me. What can I do for you? So he turns to his servant and he asks the woman. I said, okay, you do all this good stuff for me. Is there anything I can do for you? All right. And he says something really weird here in verse 13. Can we speak on your behalf to the king or to the general of the army? Apparently, Elisha must have had better terms with the government than Eliyahu did, that he wants to put in a good word with the political authorities. Well, why would he do that? Well, a blessing has to be real. A blessing has to be tangible. It's not necessarily nebulous in the spiritual realm. It has to be tangible and practical in the physical realm. So, I don't know. Does this woman have any issues, political or economic, that maybe with a good word from a good man, speaking to the right person, could you possibly, show some, kindness or help this individual out? By all means. I mean, in all due respect, even in my position as a rabbi, I meet many people from all over the world. And some people in very high positions, which needless to say will remain appropriately confidential, so don't ask. But every now and then I meet somebody who needs an introduction to somebody else. And if and when that is to be the case, I make what we call in Hebrew shidduch. I don't have a problem with that. That's my honor, my pleasure to do. Apparently that's what Elisha is similarly asking. How can I be of help to you? And Gehazi says, hey, you know, her husband is old and she has no kids. What is implied here, right? If her husband's old, she's not young. And yeah, we have midrashim and the stories, which again embellish the identities here as well. But if her husband's old, the impression is that she probably is too. She might even be close to, if not post-menopausal. And you can say, well, she couldn't have a kid then. I'll tell that to Sarah. Remember good old Sarah? Sarah Imenu gave birth at 90. And the biggest shock on her part was her periods came back. She said, oh my God, I thought I got rid of you 50 years ago and you're back. Oh! For her, a blessing and a curse, I think, like most women. But anyway, so he says to her, hey, next year you can have a kid. And she says, okay, this is very powerful language. Al tichazev b'shifchatech. Tichazev means don't be dishonest. All right? That's almost like to intentionally lie. She says to him, how could you say such a thing? She realizes the impossibility of such a thing. So she doesn't say, oh, don't raise my hopes. She pretty much says, don't deceive me. Don't lie to me. And he says, nope, you will. Now, our story continues. And this is where things get very interesting. Okay? The child grows up. He's going out with his dad into the agricultural economy. Out with the reapers. That's what kids do. They learn, business with dad. And he complains that he has a headache. So he goes to his service, take him to his mom. They carry him, bring him into his mom. She sits on her knees until noon, and he dies. This is the promised child. So she goes up and lays him in the bed of Elisha, that special little apartment. And she calls to her husband and says, get me a donkey, get me a servant. I got to go to the man of God now. She doesn't tell her husband that the boy died. She leaves him out of the loop. And he says, where are you going? It's not the day that you would normally go to see the guy to show respect. We're new moon or the Shabbat. And she says, don't worry about it. I got to go. So she takes the donkey and the servant and says, move it. Don't stop. We got to do fast. So they go up to the man of God. He's at Mount Carmel. Gehazi, the servant, sees her coming. All right, runs out and says, hey, what's going on? You okay? Is your husband okay? Is the child? And she lies, actually. She says, we're well. But now she comes to the man of God, and she takes hold of his feet. She touches him. And Gehazi wants to push her away. But Elisha says, no. Relax. Chill out here. Something's really, really wrong. And God didn't let me know. A couple of interesting things here. As you should know in our Torah tradition, it is forbidden by biblical law, especially the energetic realities underlying our reality, men and women, other than, family, do not have physical contact with one another. And I know that slaps in the face of modern social norms. Here in America, everybody shakes hands. Well, you have a lot of the rabbis and Kabbalists say you don't even do that. You have those who say that you do. In Europe, I know, especially in France, where the Rabbanit comes from, everybody there meets with a hug and a kiss. It's the norm of the day. Shouldn't be doing that. No. That's an energy. You say, it's nothing. It's innocent. I'm sure. But energy is energy, and it operates on its own laws more than you and I might think. And here's an interesting question in Jewish law. You're the holy rabbi, and the tradition in many of the religious circles around the world, all different religions, when you're in the presence of a holy man, you might kiss the hand. So even in Judaism, when you meet many of the holy sages, many people will kiss the hand of the rabbi. Can a woman kiss the rabbi's hand? She's touching the holy rabbi. Ew. Well, what's wrong with that? Even the great sage Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, who was the chief rabbi of Israel way back in the day, was asked this question because the holy great Kabbalist, the master sage of old Israel, Rabbi Yitzhak Kodori, he would always have women coming up to him and kissing his hand. And he put out his hand, and this is the way the women showed respect. And many of the religious who were holier than thou would say, how dare the rabbi allow a woman to touch him? And what, do you think the likes of a holy man like that's going to look down at people like this and even respond to them? Ugh, not even worth his time. But the chief rabbi, Ovadia Yosef, certainly did. And he says, do you think what? A woman is coming to a 100-year-old man to kiss his hand. Why? Because he's such a hot and sexy guy. We're going to put him on rabbis.com, with his big muscles. You're going to have miracles bigger than Elisha to have that happen. No. They're showing respect and honor to the Torah. He's like a living Torah, right? Like the word of Torah becoming flesh and dwelling amongst us. The Christians think that was a unique concept that John used with his Rebbe Yeshu. But no, we've always done that in our Torah circles. And women would come to Rav Kodori with that kind of honor and respect. Here, outside the norm, this woman is freaked out. Her kid's dead. And she comes, grabs onto his feet. She's begging him, all right? I didn't ask you for this kid. You're the one who gave it to me. And now look what's happened, right? He says, did I ask for a son from my Lord, right? Did I not say, don't mislead me, etc.? So, what does Elisha say? Recognizes what's going on. And apparently, Gehazi, his servant, is younger, stronger, and faster. So he says, all right, get ready, gird your loins. All right, won't get into the details of that. Apparently, they wore kilts in those days. Did they wear underwear under kilts? Controversial question. I actually have a very, very dear friend who I've known for many, many years, a longtime supporter, friend of our school, who's actually a Scottish Highlander. And one time he came and visited us in Tellico Plains when we lived there. And he shows up in the middle of this old southern country town in full Scottish regalia with his kilt and everything else in honor of me, the rabbi. And, well, remember, this is the old, what do they call them, the Scotch-Irish. So in spite of the fact that he might have stood out like a sore thumb, nobody paid it in mind. They respected him. And he was worthy of that respect. Still is. But Gehazi is now running ahead, and he says, take my staff. Remember, Moses had the famous staff? Well, Elisha has his staff. And he says, if you meet anyone, don't greet. Anyone greets you, don't answer. Place the staff on the lad's face. And the lad's mom says, the Lord lives, and by your life, I'm not leaving you. So, Gehazi, with the staff, is put in that sacred bubble of space that we learned about with the closed room, with the time and place of Joshua, like the bottle of Baba Sali. Again, closed environment, a completely parallel reality of psychic energy. Oh, there's so many secrets I don't want to get into. Ask Wilhelm Reich. He knew the secrets of this. That's what got him killed. But anyway, enough hints. So he runs ahead and does exactly what he's told. He puts the staff on the kid's face. Nothing happens. Well, what's in the staff? Magic? Wiggle of the nose, blink the eyes, and all of a sudden something happens? No. And even when Elisha comes, does he say to him, child, I command thee, in the name of the Lord, rise from the dead? Snaps his fingers? No. Things don't work like that. Like I said, there are spiritual laws of how things operate. How do I learn these spiritual laws? I would love to be able to mess around up there. Well, let me tell you something. These spiritual laws, like we said, to every blade of grass, there's an angel over it that says it to causes it to grow. Now, you want to go and interact with those angels, the angels of the grass, the angels of the field, the angels of the clouds, the angels of this, the angels of that. And if you're going to try to coerce them, they're going to get rather, a little snippy at you, and they're going to get you. This is why our sages have long taught it is prohibited by spiritual and physical law, KosherTorah law, to perform these types of manipulations We call them Kabbalah Ma'asit, which isn't really the full definition of the term, but that's how it's applied today. And anytime that you want to try to manipulate nature to your own personal effect, you got to remember you're pushing around other guys, other entities out there, and they're going to push back. So this is why you don't mess. You have to be on the level of like an Elisha and the like, who are given permission and blessing by these other entities. So when Elisha or Eliyahu or others of that caliber would ascend into the astral plane too, if you will, mess with the matrix, these entities say, prophet, servant of God, by all means, power's in your hands. Go for it. And even all the forces of that which we would call evil will again submit and surrender to the will of the prophet. All right? The Ariel, Shara Mitzvot, talks all about this stuff. It's very, very deep, very, very profound. So when you and I get to such a high level that even the forces of evil will submit themselves to our authority, well, maybe then we can do that. But I don't think that's going to be anytime soon. So what does Elisha do? Comes to the house, sees the kids lying on the bed. The first thing he does, verse 33, he came in and closed the door. Again, creating the psychic envelope, the psychic environment of silence, where in which everything happens. Now, the Rabbanit will tell you, again, she's off camera here, watching, making sure I don't, mess up. And she knows, my door's closed, I do my thing. Her door was closed, she does her things. These are sacred domains. And in all due respect, I didn't teach you this. She's been like this. She's known that. That's probably how two of us were drawn together through time and space. Remember, I'm halfway around the world and half a generation younger than me. But God works the way it does because energy knows its place. He goes up and lies down on the child, places his mouth on the child's mouth, his eyes on its eyes, his palm on its palms, and prostrates upon him. And then the child's flesh becomes warm. When you read in the Kitvei Ari, there's something called Lihishtateh al Kivrei HaTzadikim, to lie down on the graves of the righteous. Now, many people get freaked out because the Bible says you're not supposed to talk to the dead. Well, we don't. People think that you do. In Judaism, we would often go to the gravesides of the holy rabbis. But you're not going there to talk to people. If you are in New York, for example, where the leader of the Lubavitch movement, the Lubavitch Rebbe, is buried, many people go there as a pilgrimage. Many Jews from around the world will go to the Ukraine, to the town of Uman on Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, to the grave of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And people make the mistake to think, I'm actually going there to talk to the Rebbe who has passed. No, you're not. He's not there. Elvis has left the building. But the body of the rabbi has the energetic field that, again, creates that little bubbles of which we've been talking about, these private little domains. And you go into that domain at that place. And you can therefore ascend from there into the higher domain. You're not talking to the guy who's buried there. You don't even mention him. But you can tap into the energy, which we call the nefesh, the havale de grama, as it's called in the Aramaic. You have an echo of this, actually, a real story of this, back in the book of Samuel. If you remember when the prophet Samuel died and King Saul called up his soul, how did the witch from Endor get in touch with the soul of the holy prophet? What do you think? She dialed him on her psychic cell phone? No. The neshama soul of Samuel was high and sublime. But that part that was residual and left at the grave, that she can call and draw in. That's what we tap into in this psychic way. So, with that note, Elisha is now tapping into the Havale de Grama, and he's essentially jump-starting the soul of the dead child. Notice here, God's not even mentioned. It doesn't say he calls upon the Lord. He is lying down on the child, eye to eye, ear to ear, nose to nose, mouth to mouth, and he's breathing into it. what we call the chi, the life force energy, is flowing from his body into the body of the child, jump-starting it. Now, would the same thing happen if he had a modern-day defibrillator to like jump-start the kid's heart? I don't know. I wasn't there, and I'm not a doctor. But we do recognize something very profound about the nature of a defibrillator. It's electric. And you can actually jump-start the human heart, not too different from how you would jump-start an electric battery. That's science. Understanding the nature of life force has a science to it, an energy to it. And this is exactly what's being said. And now, what happens, it wasn't enough. So he says he leaves the private domain and he walks around the house here and there, gathering up more energy, apparently. And he goes back and repeats it. Then the child sneezes 7 times. Achoo, achoo, achoo. Getting the air back in, getting the consciousness back in, jump-starting the soul, and he's alive. And then he says to his servant Gehazi, call the woman, here's your son. Take, go. And she bows down, she picks up her son and leaves. That's pretty slick. Notice it never says he calls upon God. Notice for Elisha, this was not a miracle. It was actually a usage of the psychic or spiritual energetic laws that he knew very well. Is this what we would today call psychic healing? Energy healing? Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Now, I don't know any energy healer who can actually raise the dead. Now, you might ask, well, was the child really dead? I don't know. I mean, that's what the text says, so I have no reason to doubt it. But at the same time, Elisha did not just blink his eyes. He didn't call upon God in fire or the fire of life coming down from heaven. No, he had to perform an actual manipulation to materialize the effect. And that's the lesson that we need to learn, how to do all this stuff. So, whether it's the ancient traditions, for example, we have books of Kabbalistic healing, Kabbalistic energy work, not modern stuff that people come up with and make up with all kinds of fantasies and make-believe. I'm talking about old stuff. You have the books of like, I'll give you names. You can find these online. Refuah V'Haim of Rabbi Chaim Falaji. You have books like Refuah V'Haim from Yerushalayim. Remember the famous Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement? What was his great claim to fame? He was a healer. He would be able to perform all this kind of stuff. And to this very day, we have rabbis and teachers who know how to do this. And the books are out there. And I certainly, for one, do not mind translating many of these teachings and making them available to you. Why? The technique is not going to work for you unless you're going to work for the technique. Like the old saying, the right means in the wrong hands will cause the right means to work in the wrong way. But I'll make it available to you for one reason, because I want you to learn that lesson. I want you to see that the technique that is, does work when you calibrate yourself to it. So like I said, what's our motto here at our KosherTorah school? Experience is power. We can learn these things. We can do these things. You know, the next story here is that they're making a big meal, all right? And one of the children of the prophets goes out and he puts together a whole bunch of stuff, but apparently it had some poison herbs that got stuck in the pot and they're all freaking out. And Elisha says, bring me some flour. I don't know what kind of flour it was or if it was really flour, but he put something in the pot and now they're able to eat it. And he feeds a whole bunch of people. Sounds like a precursor of where the Christians got the idea of Yeshu, having like 2 fishes, something of bread, and he serves all these people. This is what Elisha did. But he knew what to do. He knew the herbs. He knew the healing. He knew how to do these things. These are the natural, energetic realities underlying our world. So for those people who focus in proper meditative connection, what we call holiness and righteousness, calibrate themselves, that mental isolation to accomplish these levels and experience these things and embrace the powers therein. And instead of looking for fantasy and magic, are ready and willing to do the details of what needs to be done in the walk of the path of the children of the prophets. We become the conduits. Just like in our previous generation, we had the Rav Kaduri, the Baba Sali, Rav Sharabi, and in our generation we have our own. Next generation, maybe you. It's all up to each individual to decide. What we learn, how we put it to bear, what we do with it. And especially in these crazy times now, I think the reason why we have such crazy times with all this going on is to get us, instead of looking to the right or looking to the left, forcing us to look up and bringing the conduit down for whatever it's worth. Okay. Kind of ran out of time, but you get the message. You understand what the underlying prophetic teachings here are. This is the real biblical Kabbalah, the teachings of the biblical prophets. This is real. It's not New Age. It's not modern. It's as old gets. And we have what it takes. Okay, we might not be able to grab the supernatural as did Elisha, but don't underestimate what is naturally psychic, like we talked about at the beginning. The wise words of the great sage Hillel, he said two things. I'll tell you both. He says, even though we're not prophets, we're their children, which means we have that power to do what needs to be done. And another place in the Gemara, he's quoted as saying, Zil Gemar, go do it. On that note, go do it. Let's see what we can do. Our courses here at the KosherTorah School are readily available if anybody wants to take the steps and see, because experience is power. Alrighty, guys. I'll see you all in our next class. Take care.